Welcome everyone to Progress Iowa Power Hour. My name is Matt Sinovic. I'm the Executive Director of Progress Iowa. We're going to give folks a minute or two to join here to make sure that we have everyone who's able to be with us tonight. But as you know, Progress Iowa, we're an issue advocacy organization that does a lot of communications and digital work. And we host these on the first Thursday of every month in order to provide hopefully really good information and training about how people can use their voice, take action, and make a difference in our state. So we are thrilled to have a wonderful lineup of speakers tonight and some really great training materials to pass on to all of you who are here with us. So thank you so much for being here. These events do not work without you participating. So we're looking forward to a great discussion from our speakers and a great, hopefully a great discussion and Q&A with all of you throughout the evening. We will stick with we will try to keep this at an hour to be respectful of everyone's time. So be aware of that. But we again are just so thankful that all of you are taking your Thursday evening with us and want to do more to participate in our democratic processes and speak out and use your voice to make a difference. So thank you so much for being here. I'll quickly run through the agenda and then I will turn it over to for the next piece of the program. We're going to hear first from State Senator Liz Mathis. Then we're going to hear from Ty Rushing, the editor of Iowa Starting Line. And then we're going to hear from for some press training tonight, because that is the focus of the night. The training tonight is about how to get earned media. And believe me when I say it is earned. So some people in the past I know have called it free media, and there's nothing, might not cost $1 sometimes, but there is nothing free about it. You have to work and earn for this, as our wonderful presenter, our Deputy Press Secretary, James Simmons, can attest. And he does a great job, and we'll go through the training materials for us in a little bit. I did want to echo what Amy is sharing in the chat to please introduce yourself. Please drop your name, or if you're with an organization or a group, and any contact information you're comfortable sharing. I also would love to recognize the members of our team that are on the Zoom tonight. Amy Adams, who is one of our organizers. Sam Blatt, who is on, but behind the scenes doing technical help tonight, another organizer for us. Katie Siddle, our messaging director, is on. And then, of course, James Simmons, our deputy press secretary, who I just mentioned before. So that is the agenda for the night. If you have questions, please put them in the chat too. We will have some Q&A with Senator Mathis here in a minute as well. But again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I actually just remembered I neglected to reiterate the goals that we have for tonight. So I kind of covered these, but I want to make sure and hit them all. So I'm sorry to the team for not actually going through the notes here. But the first goal is to create a community where Iowans can come together. We want to secondly connect progressive voices from across the state. So again, thank you for being here, because this does not happen without you. We want to empower folks on the ground, empower on the ground organizers and individuals. We want to provide toolkits, training, and resources. So those are the goals of each Power Hour, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish here tonight. So with that, I think we have everyone now. We're 7 minutes after. I'm going to introduce our wonderful Deputy Press Secretary, James Simmons, to kick things off with our first speaker. James.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm super excited for tonight, and I have the honor and the special privilege of this evening of introducing our first special guest for tonight, State Senator Liz Mathis. Senator Mathis is the current legislator from Iowa Senate District 34 and lives in Hiawatha. And before working in a child care, welfare, and behavioral health agency, and before getting elected to the Iowa State Senate, Senator Mathis worked for 16 years at KWWL in Waterloo as an anchor reporter and producer at KCARG TV in Cedar Rapids. Throughout her distinguished career, she has received numerous awards for her leadership, and it is my incredible honor to turn this presentation over to State Senator Liz Mathis.
Thank you, James. And the next time I come over to the House, I will definitely come and see you. So yeah, where do we begin with all of this? You mentioned, Matt, earned media, and it really is earned media. I think that as a reporter, I often thought that I was, really the piece, the part and parcel of democracy that was going to share what was going on in different communities with an audience. So every night I thought that really I was serving up ideas. I was looking at the pro and the con, putting it together and serving it up to the audience for them to decide. Isn't it that Edward R. Murrow said, we don't tell them what to think, we don't tell them how to think, we tell them what to think about, And so I think that was probably a guiding force for me, was that I was letting the audience decide. I was going out to gather information and make sure that I was doing it in a, very truthfully, getting it across concisely, making sure that we were communicating and visualizing the story. So I graduated from the U of I in the journalism department. And my first job really was in college. I ran a camera for the newscast at Channel 2. It was then WMT TV. And I also ran, this is little known fact, I ran the camera for a kiddie show called the Dr. Max Show. And so Dr. Max and Mambo had this kiddie show. And so I was in that environment in the television studio. When I graduated, I took a job with Channel 7 in their bureau. So I was what we call in the business a one-man band. I took all the pictures, I wrote my stories, I set up all my live shots, and would stand there with a with a light stand, come around, make sure that I was in focus, go back, and hit the record button or hit the live button to be live. And at the time, the gear was so heavy. The camera was at least 25 to 30 pounds. And I had a big leather satchel with a recording device on it. And, you hit record and play, and that was connected by a cord to the camera. I had a light kit that I still have burns all over my hands to this day, that it was very antiquated, but it was all hooked up to a belt that I wore. And the belt was probably about 5 pounds. And this is how I would go out and I would try to cover stories. So where we called it the walk of shame, when somebody would walk from the Waterloo PD over to the initial court appearance, over to the courthouse, and I'm walking with all this gear trying to get a shot of whomever had been arrested and was going for their initial court appearance. And that was really difficult. Today, reporters have a completely different set of tools to do their jobs. And so, not to say that it's easier, because the story is, you still have to track the story down. You still have to do resourcing, make sure that you have the little black book where you keep great names in it and you know who to call for the facts. And that those people will be available for you when you need to do a good story. And so, so despite the fact that the gear is a lot lighter and you can go satellite from anywhere, you can go live from anywhere at any time, which I sure wish we had that when I was still there, it's still a difficult profession to work in. So, and I'm sure Ty will talk about how sometimes the newspapers are shrinking and different media sources are shrinking. Television is changing too. The audience is shrinking because people are watching a number of different things, whether it's on cable or they're streaming it, or they don't even they're not even subscribing to cable. You're just watching maybe YouTube TV or Apple TV or whatever it might be, and a lot of people are using this. This is what they're watching any kind of visual with. So when we talk about how do you, get earned media? You have to make sure that you are advancing the story. That's the main thing I think that reporters look at. Has the audience heard about this already? Well, if they have, what's the new nugget? What's the new piece of, information that you're going to give the viewer or the listener or whoever is at your event? What is the new nugget that you're going to give? Excuse me, I've got allergies. I've got to wipe my nose here. The second thing is, for television, is a visual. A lot of reporters will look at a subject. They may not go to a bunch of people sitting around a BOPSA story, because that visual is very uninteresting. But what they might do is find someone in that crowd who has an individual story that can be visualized elsewhere, maybe in their job or participating in some event or something like that. So reporters are always looking for, how can I tell the story and it's visually interesting? Linda Ellerby used to be a reporter with NBC News. And when she worked in Alaska and she worked in Anchorage, and when she started with the networks, she was ready to write her story and then hand it over to the photographer, and thinking that the photographer was going to go out and take pictures of this story. And the photographer said, no, 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 you're in the big leagues now. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go out and shoot the story, and then you're going to write to it. So think about that. Whatever is visually, as part of the story, that really is king in television. If you watch CNN, if you watch the network news, even if you watch the local news, you can see some differences in, how reporters look at stories and how they think about visualizing. So if you want to advance something, especially a story that you feel is interesting, make sure that you think about the visual part of it. If it's you're just inviting a reporter in to sit around, in a group discussion, that's really not going to do much for that story. You might get great background, and that's another thing. Always think about doing some background with the reporter before they arrive, offering up some facts, offering up some resources. So who else can they call to verify this information? Or who else can they call to advance this information or make the story more interesting? And so over the years, I've been very fortunate to interview every presidential hopeful, from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama. And I tell you what, the story that I did with Barack Obama was when he first started. He and Michelle were here in Cedar Rapids on their first trip, and they showed up, and 14 people came to that event, and he became the president of the United States 2 terms, but he had to start somewhere. So the visual on that was, wow, there isn't anybody here, right? But he had things to say. So I thought, well, okay, I'm gonna attend this event, but I'm going to find out where else they're going. So I'm going to jump in the car and follow them and try to take pictures of them, maybe stopping in different places to just make it more interesting. And it did. And it really showed that he was just, initially starting on his journey toward the presidency. But eventually we were able to use then the huge pictures of the huge crowds that showed up, and this story, the harken back to the story where here's how he started. So so those kinds of things around politics sometimes are hard to visualize, right? How are you going to visualize Roe? How are you going to do that for this week? Well, Cindy Garlock, of course, she's on this call. She organized an event right away. And so that's very visual. People with signs, people who are taking the effort to go out, on the sidewalk, in a parking lot, in the streets, people who are talking about something outside, that's visual. Sometimes that video looks the same. So you have to think about how, if you're a photographer, how you're going to shoot that, because you need to make it interesting. So you might follow along behind somebody as they're walking. You might take pictures of some of the signs. You might, make sure that you get maybe the person who's running the event to give you some stories about the people who are attending. Maybe there's an interesting story in that crowd, and you could isolate that story with that person, then maybe follow them home or follow them to somewhere where they're going, or even call ahead of time. You could call Cindy ahead of time, find out who she thinks is attending, and if they have an interesting story, and go to their home and follow them to the event. So photographers and reporters are always thinking about how to tell the story in a square, right? Or in a rectangle if you have the HDTV, right? But how to tell it in this box so that people will listen, so that they'll understand the communication of the story, and that maybe it might call them to action. So really, reporters are that link to democracy. They are that link to free press. They are the fourth estate, and they are delivering on the piece and the part of their lives, of their profession, that makes democracy work. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
And just a reminder, everybody is on mute. So if you do have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we can take you off mute.
Matt, go
I
ahead.
say, yeah, I was gonna
Matt,
say,
go ahead.
I have a question while we're seeing if anyone else does. Just to jump in, I was wondering if you had any the example about President Obama is really interesting, and I think a great insight into how you tell that story over a period of time and all of that too. I was just curious if there's any other examples of, oh, this image that someone pitched, or the story really stands out as being memorable, or any something like that that jumps out at you that kind of either that got your attention, but also maybe captured a really good the essence of the story.
Oh yeah, there was a woman in Iowa City. I can remember sitting on the porch with her. Her name was Ilana Skruyabina, and she was a person who had survived World War One, and she came from Russia. And Barry Morrow, a screenwriter, who has written a number of screenplays and produced a number of movies, he wanted to do a movie about her. So I kind of caught wind, that he was going to do something. So I asked her for a sit down on her porch, her reminiscing about really her life, how she got to Iowa City. Phenomenal story. And so, of course, the producer says, a minute 30, Liz, it's a standard package time, a minute and 30 seconds. And I would think, oh my God, this woman's alive. I can't tell it in a minute 30. So I was able to do a series story on her, talk my producers in to say, okay, I'm going to do part 1, 2, and 3, and maybe we can get people to watch over a 3-day period. And then at that time, we weren't doing anything online, initially. So this was 1980. We weren't doing anything online. In fact, we still had manual typewriters at that point. But by the time I got to KCRG at the end of my career, we were digital. We were doing all this. So I had to learn all of this all the way through. But Elena Skryabina she was just an amazing person. She left a huge impression on me about, a person who was a survivor. And she had so many stories about her family, the tragedy, living through and walking, kind of like what they're doing in the Ukraine right now, trying to survive through bombings and through hostility. And it was she had a really tough life, but it ended out that she was very successful in Iowa City. Another story was about, I covered all kinds of weather events. I mean, I went everywhere, but there was one particular tornado that hit, it was just east of Waterloo. And I arrived on the site right after the tornado had hit, and this young man who had Down syndrome was home alone. He was probably about 20 years old, and he didn't understand what was happening. He walked out during the tornado, and what happened was he ended up in the hole of a tree that had uprooted. And I heard him moaning. We could hear, the photographer and I could hear him moaning, and we were looking all over for him. And we called 911 because he was down in this hole. Luckily, he only had a leg broken. The next day, I went to visit the site again, and really, I could not tell what the house had been made of. You couldn't tell if it was brick or it was wood. It was just in scraps everywhere. And in the middle of this damage, there was a little coffee table. It was just maybe 3 feet high, 3 feet wide, was still standing untouched. And the homeowner, whose son had Down syndrome, she said, yes, he's in the hospital, and he was very afraid. And she said, I want to show you something. And she took my hand and she took me over to this coffee table and pulled out a drawer and pulled out an old German Bible and opened the Bible. And there was a lock of her grandmother's hair still in this Bible, in the middle of this weather damage, in the middle of this tornado damage. And I just went, the hair on the back of your neck starts to stand up. So we did a story on that. And then we went back after they rebuilt their home and met their son and did some things. And they built a storm shelter in their basement. And she said that her son, no matter if he was looking at a fire that had a swirl of smoke, he would just freak out. He was really, traumatized by the whole event. But it was just a look back on this family and how they had survived. Their livestock, ran everywhere because the tornado was coming, and they had to really, they had so much damage, not only with their home, but also, out on their farmland too. So that was one of those things that really impressed me. But 27 years of stories like that. There, every other week there was something, and everyone has a story. You just have to find it. You just sit down long enough with somebody and you'll figure out what their story is.
Liz, there's a question from the chat, and it is, how do we build relationships with the media when clicks are often the goal rather than in-depth reporting of issues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, reporters are people too, and Ty will probably tell you that too. Reporters have a job to do. They are always searching every day for that story of the day. They may have planned ahead, a couple of days ahead, but when there's breaking news, they're going to go out and cover it. But you have to establish a relationship with a reporter. Call them, text them, ask them what they need. Tell them about the story that you might have, but then say, you can text them and say, well, I can tell you how to get this information and I know where to get it quickly. Be helpful. Sometimes reporters are a little suspicious if people are overly helpful. I think that's just the nature of the business. But it does help if you're on deadline and someone can get you the information fast, and they know someone, do that. Yeah, clicks are, reporters like to get clicks. And I know a couple of reporters who have said, hey, I want you to share this story, which, sure, okay, what's the story? Tell me what the story is and I'll do it. And it depends on, their visual too, what kind of visual do they have. But some of the best posts can also be one line, one sentence. And you see the Lincoln Project, they put out, sentences, just sentences and huge clicks. But when it boils down to it, when it all boils down to it, it's really about the relationship with the reporter or the relationship with the editor or even the relationship with the photojournalist and helping them see what it is that you're seeing or give them some background to help them understand the story. That's probably the best thing that you can do for a reporter.
And Liz, there is another question in the chat. Susie Nelson, Dems seem to be talking about implications of the Alito draft opinion in different ways. Some see it primarily as a threat to the right to choose. Others accuse Dems of being afraid to use the word abortion and to take Republicans head on. Another view is that we are in danger of losing our fundamental freedoms to an extremist party and their captive court. How are you thinking about how to frame this in the context of your own campaign? So not necessarily a media question.
It is kind of a media question, because if you look at this and you separate all the things that you said, you said others accuse Dems of this, the Republicans think this, okay, let me look at this as a reporter. The first part of this is, there's kind of this old story about a police officer who goes to write up a report about a car accident. And there is someone standing on this corner, someone on this corner, and they're all witnesses to the accident. And the police officer starts to write down her report. And all of a sudden, she has 4 different stories for one accident. And so that's kind of what news is about. You can have one view, but someone else looks at it from the other place, the other angle, and you're delivering that to the viewer or again the listener, and saying, this is what so-and-so thinks, this is what so-and-so thinks. Now you decide. Now you formulate your own opinion. And so here, now you're saying at the end, then you're asking, how are you thinking about how to frame this in the context of your own campaign? I've looked at this. I've looked at, this week thinking, I have always been, a pro-choice person. When I was a reporter, I really couldn't give my opinion. So let me back up a little bit. When I first ran for office, after I had left reporting and I was at Four Oaks and I realized nobody was paying any attention to children with mental health issues, I decided to run. But when I started out, it was very different because I had not expressed my opinion, my personal opinion, to people other than my husband and friends. And that wasn't part of my job, was to express my opinion. My job was to tell you what everybody else's opinion was. And so when I had to talk about abortion, when I had to talk about immigration, when I needed to talk about Medicare or issues around that, I had to express my opinion. And for the first week or so when I was running, it was stuck. It was stuck right here. And so I had to kind of, think about, well, what is my opinion about this? Well, I knew my opinion on abortion a long time ago was, that I am pro-choice. But with this, I think, first of all, everybody was talking about the leak. And I think a lot of reporters were talking about the leak. And a lot of Republicans were talking about, we can't have this. This is a leak. And you kind of think, as a reporter, okay, this political reporter has been covering the Supreme Court for 20 years, 30 years, and he has really deep sources. And will they call him into court and request him to reveal his sources? So it will be, this very traditional, look at what are the rights of people to know? What is the right to know what's going on? And did this reporter, obviously, this reporter decided that the public had a right to know this, and this was the time that he was going to reveal it. And the court had, written this opinion as far back as February. So when I talk about the frame of my own campaign, I'm looking at this from certainly a pro-choice perspective, and how this is going to, affect women in the state of Iowa. What has already been done with Justice Katie's decision, what will soon, what will be revealed with Mitch Turner's opinion. Will we turn around? I'm worried right now about if the Republicans at the State House are going to put some trigger bills in, let's say in the HHS budget bill. Or are they going to do a leadership bill? What are they going to do? Or do they still have things up their sleeve, for before the end of session? So that's what I'm thinking about in the context of my own campaign. And when I talk about it, I talk about codifying Roe. Is there a chance that Congress can do that? I know that they've passed a bill already in the House. But will they be able to do this in the Senate? So that's kind of what I'm framing my opinion up, or my statements up, in my own campaign. Does that make sense?
I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Liz. And I can't imagine how challenging that must be to go from being a reporter where you can't share that to then having to, be on one side or the other when you're campaigning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you have to be open to everyone's opinion. I mean, there were times where, I'm thinking of one particular case, there was a woman running for school board in Waterloo, and she had birds flying around her house when I came in, and she asked me to put booties on my feet, and she had an oxygen tube that she was pulling back, but it wasn't connected to anything. So, I'm sitting there kind of observing, kind of looking around, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to ask her the standard questions. Let's see what kind of answer she gives. And she gave, answers from her perspective, but I couldn't judge. I was not going to judge. I was kind of observing and going, this is peculiar, but let's see if, she gives some statements that can convince people that she would be a good school board member. So she did win subsequently, and then she didn't win the next time. So, yeah.
Thank you for all of those great questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to, I think, James. So thank you, Senator Mathis.
I'm actually going to bounce it over to Matt to give an introduction to Ty Rushing.
Great. Thank you, James. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Senator Mathis, for taking so much time with us tonight and that great discussion. We appreciate you being here and doing that. It is my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Ty Rushing, who's a senior editor with Iowa Starting Line. He's originally from Kansas City, Kansas. He moved to Iowa in 2013 to pursue his dream of becoming a professional journalist. He has worked at the Newton Daily News, Sioux City Journal, Northwest Iowa Review, and community journalism is his thing. So he's now at Iowa Starting Line. And Ty, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I know this is about media, and we had a great discussion about the images that we that we need to use. So I don't know if that tees up a Ty Tries discussion here or what, but I'm interested to know what's next for that. So that's pretty amazing. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, of course. I mean, man, I got a tough act to follow. I mean, a politician and a journalist, like, dang, just take all the jobs. Like, okay. So yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. So like Matt said, my background is community journalism. So I'm from Kansas City. I had no idea that weekly newspapers were a thing, growing up down there, because I had the Kansas City Star. The Kansas City Star is why I wanted to become a newspaper guy. And so coming to Iowa, I learned a lot more about what community means and what a community paper means and why people care about their public schools, why you see the mascot on the water tower, why shopping local is important, why people who don't farm pay attention to the rain gauge, because, they know that the ag economy is very important to the state as a whole. Like, I learned all of these different things. And so I took that with me, from place to place I went in community journalism, because the community is the most important part of that. And so if you want to get in touch with, if you have something that's like, let's say you want to get a story in the Sheldon Mail Sun, one of the papers I used to help manage, I need a strong local connection there. And I ran into that trouble a lot, especially during political campaigns, because, everybody wants that earned media. They want their candidate to be in the paper. They want you to say, oh, here's a front page story featuring, candidate A or candidate B. But at the same time, sometimes those people wouldn't come to your area, or their connection wouldn't be strong enough. Like, if you follow me on social media, I'm always talking about the Iowa connection. But that also applies to your local paper. So if you want to get a good, you need to get a good relationship, like Liz was saying. Excuse me, Senator Mathis. Let me show some respect there. Senator Mathis was saying you got to have a good relationship with a journalist, and that's always a great thing. Like, Matt has a pretty good relationship with me. Like, he shared ideas with me. Progress Iowa is really, really good about reaching out ahead of time and having things like they let you know what things are going to be. They have people you can talk to. Like, they make it really easy to work with them. So like, it's good that they're putting this on. They have a lot of good pointers, but you need to like build that relationship with a reporter. And because like I was telling some research scientists last year, you guys can have the best research in the world, but if nobody knows about it, what good does that do you? And so pointers I gave them were just like, really good press releases, because as Senator Mathis mentioned, newsrooms are contracting. Like, newsrooms are shrinking. There are less bodies out there covering the news. And so it's like, sometimes it's like, I know we talked about like the clicks were brought up earlier, but like, sometimes it's just about, you don't have enough bandwidth. I mean, we had the most carefully laid out plans this week. We had all the stuff we wanted to do. And then Politico ruined everyone's week by dropping that bombshell story on Monday. And so like, obviously my team and we all had to pivot. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 stories related to the fallout from the Roe v. Wade draft, like that have come out this week. I mean, there's still more, stories out there. We still got protests we're going to go cover and more events that are happening. And so like, we wanted to do some other things, like plan out more fun things, more lifestyle things, because we're trying to diversify our content. But when something big like that happens that, shakes up the entire world, you pivot. And so like, that's kind of how it is in newsrooms. I mean, it's tough. It's very, very hard to try to cover all of these things, especially when you have less people doing it. I mean, the Des Moines Register just dropped a story earlier today about Lee Enterprises, which has 10 Iowa newspapers looking to cut $45 million, which means that's less eyes, covering those school boards, covering those boards of supervisors, covering those city councils. That's less. And that's the trend everywhere. And so it's harder and harder to get enough people to cover the news. And so like, so it's like not always just about like, oh, we don't think your cause is important enough. It's you got to really sell it to this reporter. Like you got to let them know that, hey, no, this event is worth your time, or this thing we're trying to get, some media attention for, it's valuable. It's something your readers should know. It's something that people in your community should know. Like you got to really sell them on that, because it's you got less bodies to do the job that, dozens of people used to do sometimes for like one city. I mean, it's a tough environment out there. And so like a well-written press release can go a long way. And like, while print isn't as big on visuals, like as with TV, like you need something stimulating, you still need a good visual. Cause like there's a lot of times I'll get a press release and there's like no photo. And so then we're in the newsroom, we're scrambling like, okay, so what are we going to put with this story? Like, what are we going to run with this? And then if you don't have access to stock images or things like that, you kind of SOL. And so you got to think about that as well. So well-written press releases with art, because sometimes I get a lot of campaign announcements and it's like they don't include a picture of the candidate. And it's like, hey, I know that you feel that, you're big enough because you're running for public office that everyone should know exactly who you are. But the problem is we don't know who you are, especially if you're running for like House District number 36. Like, okay, point, like, the average person isn't going to be able to point to House District 36 on the map, and we don't know why you're running for it. So like, include a photo of yourself. Like, and I'm not trying to pick on House District 36. I just randomly threw that out there. So just don't go Googling House District 36 and be like, oh, it was just the first random number that came to mind. But, a well-written press release, a photo, build a good relationship with your reporters. Like, I love when public relations folks are really good at their job, because they make my job easier. Like, obviously they have a pitch. They want to get, they're trying to get a message told for their organization or their client. But, we also need content sometimes. So it's like, it's a perfect relationship. And then if you can help me explain this thing to my readers and let them know why this should matter to them, even better. And, like Senator Mathis was saying, like, if you got resources that we can go and verify your findings, even better. I had a story that dropped last week about, it was a more in-depth investigation on Pottawatomie County spending $3.5 million on a ski hill. $3.5 million on a ski hill in Iowa. They didn't have a single public meeting that was open for residents to come in and give their input on this. Everything was done in closed session and behind closed doors, including having one of the supervisors fly out to Colorado and fly out to Seattle to meet with the person they bought the ski hill for. No one was able to people reported on the sale of the ski hill, but no one until I got into that story, really reported on all these details that came out about it, because the closed sessions got released. And the supervisor admitted to a lot of things during a meeting with some people in the community who were upset by the purchase. And because I had a good relationship with some of the organizations that helped put that meeting on, they were able to share content with me, and I was able to go verify it myself. I was able to watch that meeting. I was able to go watch those closed sessions. I was able to study the minutes. And that was a story that took me a couple of days to write. And I've been pushing off for weeks because, again, all that other crazy stuff that pops up, trying to put out the news. And then dealing with the Iowa legislature. No offense to you, Senator Mathis, this isn't your fault. But so I was able to do that kind of story, like that in-depth reporting, that stuff that, people say they want, which sometimes the numbers don't back that up. Sometimes it's like the stupid story about a puppy gets way more views than the story you spent weeks on. Like, that's just the way it is. But, you're still glad you did it. But I was able to do that kind of thing because an organization helped me out. Like, I still had to go do a lot of legwork, but they kind of pointed me in the right direction. And that can go a long way to getting your story told, especially getting the story told well, one that's of importance to your community as well. So, just have good relationships. Make sure you do your homework too before you approach a paper, because nothing would annoy me more when I worked in Sheldon, when people would try to get me to do a Spencer story. And it's like, that's not my coverage area. The people I serve are in this community. Sheldon is 5,300 people. It's in O'Brien and Sioux County. So why is this Clay County story important to me? Why should I put this in my local paper? Why should this go on the front page here? The people who are paying my bills, who are by buying this paper, They don't want Spencer stories. They want Sheldon stories. And so, do your homework. Make sure if you're going to approach the person, make sure it's about their community, their county, something that's relevant to their readership or viewership. So a little bit of homework, well-written press releases with visuals, good relationships with the press, that can all go a long way in helping get your story told. Oh, Matt, I think you're muted.
Oh, I was going to say, great. Thank you so much. That was really terrific. And forgive me now. I don't know if we're jumping into Q&A or if we're just going into the training, because we don't have a ton of time left, but I want to make sure that we have a good discussion, but also have James be able to give his training presentation too. So
I think let's jump into the training. I will
Okay.
keep this to, I will have a goal to wrap all this up by 7:50.
Okay.
We still have 10 minutes for questions at the end and discussion. And for anyone listening to here or watching this in the future, no worries about this being short. We have covered a lot of these topics in previous trainings that are available on our website. And if anybody would like has any follow-up questions or any follow-up information, please feel free to share that with any member of our team. And Matt now has the slides up. Awesome. So we are going to jump in and I'm going to run through this really fast. How to earn your earned media. Matt, would you go ahead and skip forward a couple slides? There we go. Thank you. So we're going to start out by looking at the drafting of a press release. As Senator Mathis said, and Ty just said right there, press releases are a great tool for an organization or individuals who are looking to put together rallies or events, and as ways to intrigue the media to come and cover it. They gave some great points about this in their talking, but we want to make sure. And as you can see on the screen right now, the example of what a press release that we actually just wrote up for that event that Cindy put together for Cedar Rapids. Oh no, excuse me, I misread that. This is for the KBG, Ketanji Brown Jackson confirmation rally that was held outside of Grassley and Ernst office a few weeks ago. But as you can see in this press release is right there, Iowans call on Senator Ernst and Grassley to approve Judge Jackson's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. While that title itself may not be the funniest or the most catchy thing in the world to say, it is powerful. It's got an action involved. It has a subject, Iowans who were involved in. We've got a target, in this instance, Senator Ernst and Grassley, as well as an action that we're pushing for. You can see, as Ty mentioned in his part of the presentation, that there's a photo right there to be included as well. So we've included some art with this, and then the body of the paragraph. And Matt, if you can go to the next slide, please. And so looking at those main components of a press release, we want that catchy title. We want something that is going to make the media interested. If they are barraged, and as they both spoke about, media outlets are shrinking and they're working on the same amount of news, and actually probably more news now with all the technology and everything coming out, with less people. And so they are constantly being inundated with all this information. And so you need to have something in your press release that has a catchy title that's going to get their attention. And then after you have your catchy title, you want your opening paragraph, your money paragraph, to have all of the information that you need, all the information that's the meat of the story up front right there. We've got a press release. Iowans went, and the last one, Iowans went to Cedar Rapids and outside of Ernst and Grassley's office to demand that they vote in confirmation of KBJ, excuse me. And then beyond that, we're going to get into the body paragraph quickly here, but beyond that, you can go into more details and you can get more quotes and stuff, but you want that first paragraph to really have the meat of the information. And the next slide there, thank you. And so once you get to the body of the press release, you want to get to that bulk of the release. You want to throw in some quotes. If you have had speakers at the events, if you had worked with someone like Senator Mathis in advance and asked her to give a quote about Roe v. Wade, if that's an event that you're working towards moving forward, you can include those quotes as well as contact information in there with permission of the people that you've included. So reporters have someone to reach out to and follow up with about the event or hear about from their story. We like to say, sell the brownie, not the recipe. Asario Asat, excuse me, not Asario Ansat, excuse me. ASO, who we follow a lot for a lot of messaging stuff. You don't want to get too technical in it. reporters are very, very smart people. The more information you can include that makes sense, great, but they don't need everything explained to them in the nittiest, grittiest details. You want to get them the bulk of things and give them a direction of what you're going for your story or for the article you're pitching, but allow them to still have that journalistic ability to go into it, dive into it, and take the story how they need to. And so that is the basis of a press release. Matt, can we go forward a slide? Thank you. Oh, and the one last thing I forgot to include on there, make sure you have a contact information for your organization, for yourself, or something else with the press release. Give the reporter someone to talk to or ask questions for as a starting off point. Awesome. And then we're going to move forward to the next slide. We're going to identify and pitching reporters. In the next slide, please. So I'm going to go through this map really quickly. You can see this lovely, colorful chart put together by Laura Bay Lynn from Bleeding Heartland. These are the TV media markets in the state of Iowa. And while it's not a hard rule of thumb, TV markets are typically where print markets outside of like the larger print markets work within the state, including in the communities. As you can see there, we have 9 different media markets in the state of Iowa, but the 2 largest ones are the ones in the center, the orange, which is central Iowa, Des Moines, and a lot of the surrounding counties, in the green, which includes Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, and Iowa City. Those 2 markets are the largest markets in the state of Iowa that focus primarily and almost exclusively just on Iowa events and Iowa news. All the other markets are shared with another state, and while there is some original Iowa reporting, those 2 markets are the most reliable for consistent Iowa political news and updates about the Capitol, because they tend to have the larger cities that have the larger market. Next slide, please. I promise we're going to get through this. It might be a little after 7:50. So when you are targeting reporters, I'm going to bounce off something that Ty said just a few minutes ago. You want to make sure that you are looking for people in your community. If you're doing an event in Des Moines, or even like an hour outside of Des Moines, you could pitch KCCI, WHO 13, Local 5. All of these stations send people out, and they have a wider coverage area because they're a larger media market. But somewhere like the Storm Lake Times, while they have taken op-eds and other things from around the state, they're focused primarily on their community that they're reporting on. They want to talk about the things that the people who are their subscribers, as Ty said, are interested in. And so when you're pitching a story, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide for this, Matt, thank you. And so this is an example of a press pitch or an advisory we actually have sent out for a rally coming up. This is a selfless plug for Progress Iowa. We have a rally for reproductive rights this weekend at the Iowa State Capitol. And so this is the advisory that we put together for it. You can see at the top, we've got Des Moines, Iowa. I've identified the city of where it's going. And so that right there is already narrowed down where I'm going to pitch this advisory or send this advisory to, because while KCRG or KWWL out in Eastern Iowa are wonderful and have great reporters, they're not going to send someone to go drive 2 hours into Des Moines to cover an event that they can get from one of their sister stations that will share the coverage with them. And so now we already know that we've narrowed down, and I don't need to focus on sending this advisory to people in the far west or far east sides of the state, because we've got the central Iowa market. We've got that opening paragraph that explains what's going on, why we're doing this. And then we've got all the information in this advisory, the title of the event, where it's at, the location, the time that it's going to start, as well as some links and websites for this as well. A little bit more description, and you can see there's a couple of links included in that description that has some facts that we thought were relevant to this if a reporter was interested in coming. And finally, at the bottom of that screenshot, you can see a list of some of our event hosts that are in the coalition for this organization. And so while this specific advisory did not have quotes and a bunch of information or already pre-written up from speakers at the event, it gives a pretty good indication to the reporters that we've pitched to that there's going to be a pretty good lineup of people speaking with all of these different organizations going on, the location and when it's going on. And so we'll send up follow-up information with more information later on, but this is a great example of how we focused on Des Moines. We looked at those outlets. We have organizations and we have that spectacular background, the Iowa State Capitol, which is just beautiful. For that visual, there's going to be speakers, and this really encapsulates all of what was discussed tonight. So thank you all so much for listening to me ramble really quick through this. My last thing I have for you before we're going to turn it over to a quick Q&A session with Senator Mathis, Ty Rushing, Matt, myself, and anyone else from our team, if you have any questions, is we have a call to action. As we all know, Politico changed the world earlier this week by dropping the leaked Supreme Court draft opinion that may overturn Roe v. Wade in just a matter of months. And so we are calling on everyone to write a letter to the editor, write an op-ed, contact your local media. And if you're not sure how to start or where the best place to do that is, send them to us. We have an online news and media blog, a commentary blog as well, called potluck.fm. We are always looking for community people to join in and send in writing, but it's also a great place that if you're not 100% confident or sure about where to start as a writer or where to start pitching to the media, that you can practice with our team, and we're happy to help you and your organizations. And with that, this is the contact information for our press team. My name is James Simmons. I'm the Deputy Press Secretary. Our Press Secretary, Catherine Kuckelman, couldn't be here tonight, but she's also wonderful and a great person to reach out to for questions. And I believe with that, I will take a breath and we will pause the recording so we can go into the Q&A session.